Estimation is an art, and when we talk about estimation, it's very important for the project managers and expert for to become an expert project manager, that we tell our client clearly that estimation for more than longer time, like for 8 weeks, 9 weeks, it's not it won't be accurate. Yeah, sometimes the client wanted for an approval of the budget, for the approval of a budget from the user department, but mostly it is better to mention to the client that estimation, if it is more than 3 months, 4 months, with a very detailed level, it's not practical because requirements keep changing. So it's very important to understand these. In fact, it's very difficult to create accurate estimates for work that will be performed more than 6 to 8 weeks from today. It's I have observed that when you're working on a particular phase of the project, you can plan that phase with reasonable accuracy. For example, your team is working on requirement. So on that particular requirement, because usually what happens when we talk about the traditional project management or even agile, so the capacity of the team nowadays is very agile, because sometimes we put more resources, sometimes we keep less resources. So usually in the when you are following a traditional approach, and when again it depends on the project, if you are in a project where you know the client very well, you know the domain very well, you know the technicality very well, then it's very easy. It's not a big deal. But when we talk about a project which is very complex, you have to study. Some projects need external help, like a technical expertise, not from your project. You can have organizational technical experts in your project coming up and helping you in analysis of the project in the requirement phase. So those things, it requires time, and in such cases you can plan only for those phases. So when you're working on a particular phase, you can plan for reasonably with accuracy for that phase, getting right down into the detail of what needs to be achieved. But the phase that starts 3 months from now, I think it is very difficult, because it is the things keep on changing. And why I'm saying this, because estimation, when once we do an estimation, again the time, for example, there is a task A, and again I'm talking about the IT project perspective, that can, for a resource for the task A, it can take some time. But for the same task A, the resource B can take more time. So it all depends on the various situation, and sometimes it also dependent on the external dependencies. The tool, you might have to purchase an external tool and it has not arrived. So there are n number of things when it comes to estimation, when it comes to the estimation, and also when actually we get into details and do it. I'll give you an example. I was doing redesigning of certain framework in a project, and in a very large scale application, web application. So initially when my company was in the bidding stage, it has given a very high level estimation, and also it was totally different when we actually start executing the project, when we sat down with the customer. Because usually when the customer bids a project to the IT, especially IT projects, they, some clients, they themselves have a very lesser idea of the requirements, and as they choose the vendor, as the team starts interacting, this is more about the business logics. Then the team starts interacting with the end users, then they start developing it. So it's a long process. It's not just a one process in one short scenario. It becomes a long process. So it's very important. But usually client pressurizes the project management, and trust me, I have faced this situation where the client pressurizes, when especially if you're in a, if your client is a public sector client, they pressurize you to, because they have lot of approvals. And so it depends on the experience to experience. But as a project expert project manager, it's your very duty to tell the client, and if the client is not agreeing with you, then of course you can push the channels through your senior management and say that, because at the end it is very it will be in good, it will be a win-win situation for your client and yourself, where you have to agree to a process. And once I was handling an insurance project, where IT project, wherein in insurance the dynamic is more, sometimes the rules changes and all. that juncture, if the client is asking an estimate at a very detailed level, it's not possible to plan for 3 months, 4 months for a support team. I'm talking not for a new development team, support team. So in those cases, it's very important that what is the client, if the client wants an accuracy, and if as a project manager, because we need to balance the parameters, it is not only the requirements, but you need to see the customer's happiness, with also we need to see the project budget. So it is definitely, because many a times the team, if they don't have very well function knowledge, it's not about the IT project or any other project. It happens even in all the phases, whether it is a construction project. In initial stage, when you are just after initiation, when you are collecting the requirement, where when you are in a very when you are in the planning phase, so the higher level planning takes place, but it is very important to put a clause to the customer that we will do a requirement gathering stage. We will see the requirement. What are your requirement? It could be in the construction, for example, a painting a particular room. So we need to, once the client start discussing, and here one other important factor is the change, because any customer, I'm very practically speaking, they don't, it is not possible, because sometimes the customer is very clear, but then suddenly the user requirements changes. And I have seen many times in IT projects, the project gets on hold because suddenly the user says we don't want this feature. So all these things comes up, so it's very important to consider these factors affect the estimation. Instead of planning the entire project in one go, you can use a rolling wave approach that gives a very rough, broad based estimate for any deliverable. So, many a time project managers use this approach. So, for any deliverables, you can use a very broad base estimates for any deliverable that's too far out to estimate, and only putting the effort in breaking down the detail and estimating properly the works that comes in the immediate future. So, in the rolling wave, usually I will suggest this rolling wave approach for the projects, especially in nowadays the dynamics are very high. The client keep, because they are not having your project as only project, single project, they handle multiple projects. So sometimes I've seen that customer takes weeks to respond back to your requirement queries. So it's important that you plan for the phase you are in, and do a detailing, you prioritize. So if you are in the current phase, you estimate for it. By communicating this approach, you will definitely, it will help you, and it can definitely give more accuracy. And trust me, there are certain conditions, because if you start giving over estimates to your customer, I have seen many project managers doing it under the client pressure, and definitely it is a thing to avoid, because at the end we will give some estimation, and which is yes, we'll say yes, it can be done in 2 days, but we need to consult to the team, we need to give an accurate estimation, because it hits the project. There are certain projects which are fixed bit in the scope, so those project gets highly impacted with this kind of estimation, where if the estimations are not proper, because sometimes looking at the higher details, we will think that yeah, this job can be done in 2 days, but actually when you go in detail, you analyze the requirement, then you will feel that there is loads of work involved in it, and maybe we would have estimated 2 days effort, but it could have been a 10 days effort. So all these things comes in the picture when it is making your life simple. Project management, it's not very complicated if we make it simple. It is including the estimation part.